You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the November 6th meeting of the Michigan City Tree Board. You can find more information for this meeting at www.accesslaportecounty.org.
5:30, the magic hour. So let's get started. Call to order the regular meeting of the Michigan City Tree Board today. Welcome to the Michigan City Tree Board. Laura Henderson, our secretary, could you do the roll call?
For November 6th, 2024.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary Nell, for pointing that out. Otherwise, we would be lost in time here.
We would wonder if it was over 8/20/25. Jen Birchfield, present. Dennis Britton. Dominique Edwards, present. Betsy Alsesser, here. Laura Henderson, I'm here. Jim Millowitz.
Here.
Mary Nell Murphy.
Here.
Vidya Cora. We have a quorum. Great.
Great. The agenda has been circulated to everyone. Do we, anybody move to approve the agenda? Do we need to approve the agenda?
Yeah,
I think we do.
I usually see that done, yeah.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The agenda is hereby approved. Minutes, approval of minutes for October 2nd, 2024 meeting. The minutes have been circulated around and I also circulated an addition to an amendment to the minutes. Has everyone seen that? I have paper copies of it here.
Oh, that's right.
I saw that.
Yes.
Dominique, do you need one?
Yes, thank you.
Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the amendment and the minutes? Does anybody have anything to add to these? Not hearing anything. Do I have?
I do. So I think, Jen, I think you agreed to do not all of the ordinances, but just one of them?
Yes. And the reason for that was that it seemed that this was the ordinance that Michael was asking this board to take action on,
That's what.
whereas the others were more kind of advisory.
Yeah, that's my memory of it. I thought this was all missing from the minutes, and I thought it was important enough that it should be addressed and added to the minutes.
So it was just one of them, not all three that are listed, or four. And I'm trying to quickly find your document that compared the two, so I know what the number was on that. Oh, it's right in front of me here. Okay, 102-34. 102-34. So those were all presented, but Jen, okay, and it does say that, 102-34. Oh, now that we've clarified that, or whoever was confused.
So would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes with the amendment?
I so move.
Now second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes of the October 2nd, 2024 meeting with the amendment that has been circulated? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. All right. Treasurer's report. there's been a copy that has been circulated, no changes from August. Any comments, concerns,
Well,
thoughts?
yeah, I guess the same as the last few times. I mean, the donations, I don't think are showing up.
It's not as a separate fund, which is,
Won't show up on this at all.
it won't
Okay.
show up on this. It
Okay.
has to be requested specifically.
Well,
Do we need to do that?
let's do that.
How do-
I think I mentioned it last time.
Who makes the
I need
request
to-
and to who?
I will have to start making that request.
Okay.
It's not-
Thank you.
Probably to the comptroller, wouldn't you
Yes.
think, Laura?
Yes,
That
That's what I
she
gotta do
include the
next.
donations on this report? Is that what you're talking about?
the donations is a separate fund. It will not be on this report. I request a separate printout for that fund.
I see,
It's
okay.
separate.
Okay.
It's not part of this.
I got it.
This
Okay.
is part of the general fund.
So will you talk to the comptroller then about that?
I will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't find the piece of paper that they send us all that useful. It's just
It's not.
a lot of numbers and money that we can't access.
That's why it looks the same every month.
That's right. We don't want to confuse you with too many more details, but
I have some questions.
All right.
Some of this stuff.
with our $500 budget or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
No,
Oh, no
no.
questions here.
First, I'm writing down what I have to do, so I actually do it.
Talk to the comptroller
Yes.
and request a
I
printout.
got it. I wrote it down.
Great.
Now I have something else I
Oh,
would
you have
like to
something else?
discuss.
Okay.
Okay, I'm looking at this stuff, and I do not see the line. Maybe I'm not looking at it right. Where the board gets paid. Maybe they're not gonna pay us.
So that is not reflected on this at all.
I don't
You're
think
talking
that's
about a
in
per
It
diem?
usually, expense budget worksheet report. Salaries and regular salary and wages. And the one that's there is for the forester. And let's see, what does this say?
I don't have that part. I only have a one-page thing that does not reflect that.
Oh,
So
I'm guessing it's on another piece of paper.
maybe another piece of paper that I didn't print out.
yeah. It's, okay, it is on this, which is budget performance report fiscal year to date, April.
Okay,
And this has 411 salaries and wages, and that's Michael's salary, and underneath it, it's 411.015 salaries and wages for compensation
Right.
at $3,600. But didn't he say he was sending us what he was presenting for the budget?
he did, I think, provide us with, he did circulate a copy of
Yes,
his budget.
I saw that. It was-
After it was submitted to the mayor. And I don't know where it is in the process.
Very,
beyond that.
very
Yeah, I don't see
terse.
anywhere where our pay is in the budget.
Where are what?
Our pay is in the budget.
It wouldn't be in his budget. It would be, isn't it reflected on that, the budget pages that you have there in front of you? I thought you just said it isn't on there.
In April,
Well, that would be a question for the comptroller.
I think that is a good question for the comptroller to sort this out. Whatever you think is missing from this report, why isn't it in there and where should we find that?
And I would add on budget topics, so it seems as though we have a separate tree board budget from the, Michael City tree
Yes.
budget. I know that there was some confusion, we've discussed the tree board budget and what should be in there and it had some emails circulated. But I don't think, I think we had some difficulty getting to the city comptroller and So I'm not sure how to go about that. I hope we're not too late.
We might be.
We might be. Michael kind of indicated we might be too late.
I did
But I
send out
think it
this
was-
summer 2 emails to our city, council liaison,
Okay.
specifically asking to,
And no response.
no.
So,
That's-
I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
think going,
I was gonna say, so at that point, do we just submit that budget directly to the comptroller? So what is like the process and kind of the pathway if we're not getting an appropriate
City
response?
City council.
we
does-
never submit a budget. We have not
City
submitted a budget.
council does that, and I don't know if they're done.
So was our liaison supposed to advocate on our behalf
Yes.
for that budget in front of council to
We
advocate?
thought
would be nice.
Yes, yes.
That,
You want me to do?
right, and it's- As a side note, that's
Council saying,
also-
We have this budget, so.
just to clarify that process of, if we're not getting that response, how we go about submitting our budget.
Yeah, is there a different city council person each year, and so this is kind of,
Yeah,
probably.
we don't have carryover then.
well, we haven't had any money, so there's been no reason to submit.
Well,
a
there
budget.
is a small amount of money for office supplies.
Yeah.
My next question is, if we don't spend that, and it doesn't seem like we can easily spend it, does that carry over or is it lost?
I think
Can we
might
spend
get
it on
lost.
anything else?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Well, I think it's important that we submit, and I'm bad at this, submit our invoices. Number one, they have to be approved at one of our meetings.
Right.
And
I know
that
you've
has
done
to be in the minutes. And then you can take it to the comptroller for reimbursement.
And I know in the past we have approved some, invoices
Yeah.
or presented them here at the meetings.
Okay, so if I spend $30 on ink for the handouts that we give out when we give out the saplings, that's a lot of work for a $30 reimbursement.
But that's the process.
But that's the process.
Yeah, the board has to approve it, and then it gets submitted to the comptroller for payment. Is that right?
Yeah,
Does that
something
work?
like that.
Okay.
Or maybe it has to go through Carrie Bailey, I don't remember.
Well, if you're meeting with the comptroller, maybe you can ask these
Do
questions.
need to clarify. And I hope that our level of scrutiny also on these budget issues also applies to the $1 million that the city will be spending over the next few years. Any other questions about the treasurer's report or issues, concerns? Laura, thank you for taking care of that. Let us know what you learn. Communications, have there been any communications of note?
Well, Tim sent an email.
Tim Werner?
Yep,
Former board president
I see.
and current.
Dogwood
City
Hills
engineer.
Tree Farm fall tree availability. Did everybody get this or just?
I got it.
Okay. So this is Dogwood Hills Tree Farm, and they're talking about orders, recruiting orders.
Okay. Does that require any action on our part?
I don't think so. But I was just glancing through their list, and
Okay,
they have an awful lot of, they have non-native trees, they have clone trees.
these are trees for purchase, right? I think I saw
Trees
that.
for purchase.
And are these trees for purchase through the IRA grant or through something else?
This is just their advertisement.
Okay.
I think
I think Tim
that,
just forwarded that to us because it is one source of purchasing trees that we
yeah,
want to be aware of.
and I think, is it Dogwood Hills, what Michael was talking about getting trees from?
I suspect that may be where we procured the trees for the Boys and Girls Club planting.
Okay.
Trees for the grant, my understanding is that those will have to go through a request for quote.
Okay.
I won't speak to, at NERC, we procure trees, obviously, and I won't speak to which companies have responded to our request for a quote.
Sure.
or those specifications, but my understanding is with this large grant, that trees procured through that would need to go through a request for quote process, similar to how our contractor did that. So I think that's a process that will need to happen. I did have a meeting several months ago with Michael and the Student Conservation Association and US Forest Service. And I believe we're trying to schedule a meeting in December with Student Conservation Association and Michael and myself, and probably US Forest Service will be there. Because I do think we did have some conversations about, SCA will be assisting in planting some of those trees. They already have an existing ordering program, so I'm not sure exactly where Michael and them landed on, does it make sense for us to contract with SCA to procure the trees, and store, but there were discussions of where those trees would be stored. So I don't know kind of the status of that, of whether Michael would handle it through Michigan City or SCA would handle it as like a sub contract.
In any case, there'll be a bidding process, and
It will need to be competitively.
and this just may be one option of people who might
Oh, yeah, I would
might
say
bid
we
on
should
it.
certainly receive the,
But that we're not at that point, and we're not doing it.
I know, yeah, I think NIPSCO has used them, and, so yeah, it would just be a matter of, spelling out the specifications of the trees that are probably outlined in the grant of what caliper and they're native and this and that. And then seeing which companies, and I could provide probably, NERC has our request for quote, I could provide that as an example of how that works.
Well, the tree board doesn't have to do the request for quote.
That would be, I think that would be Michael,
Yeah. I think this is just a point of information,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Just,
It is. It is just
having that
a,
list, and since we have no money to buy trees ourselves, it's kind of a moot point.
I was
It came to the
curious,
city engineer's office, email, the city engineer has no money for trees, the tree board does, and the forester, so it was forwarded to the
Okay,
appropriate group. There's
Okay.
information on the.
thank you.
thank you.
are there any other
was-
communications for?
I was curious about where this is located.
If it's, I don't.
They don't.
It's over by
Middlebury.
okay,
I was just there
Middlebury.
okay,
2 or 3 weeks ago,
okay.
tagging trees for the floor.
Okay, and we will, I think, we can talk to Michael and see in the grant specifications if there are certain requirements of, the types of trees, if they're containerized, if they're all burlapped, or all of those details, that I think Michael would work out, through the grant and issuing that RFQ.
Right.
And
Are there any other
the
communications?
city engineer also included avoid planting fruit trees along Franklin Street Business District.
That was an editorial comment by the city engineer.
It is something that the city does not desire to have smashed fruit all over Franklin Street, like we have right now with the little Bosch pear things, or the little Bradford pears. So
Can we cut them all down?
We should cut those Bradford pears down anyway.
slowly working on that.
All right, communications. Any other communications?
Yes.
We'll have a grant for that.
Mary?
Are you done or did?
That's all it is.
Okay, yeah, so I want to, and I don't think I sent this on to you, but we did get from the mayor's office proclamation declaring Arbor Day for 2024. And that's a proclamation that's necessary in order to fill out the Arbor Day Foundation application. So I was glad to receive that. I was going to ask Michael, I think I'll email him, if he wanted to do the application. I've started it, I did last year's, or if he doesn't want to do the whole thing, there's just one section where I requested the budget and got back from the City Hall office the numbers for, like, general numbers on tree care, because Arbor Day wants to know how much was spent on tree removal versus tree planting, and I think some things were kind of lumped together, so.
That's what I noticed about his budget, that it weren't separate lines for separate activities.
Okay, so I will follow up with Michael on the application for Arbor Day. And
If
it's
I could
due,
make a
Excuse me, just before we go on.
I'm just gonna
Laura,
finish my sentence, which
All right,
is it's
so-
due at the end of December.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that just occurred to me. Laura, are you going to do the minutes for the meeting since Michael's not here to do this?
I'm not sure. I can do that.
Would you do that? You are the secretary, so that would fall within your jurisdiction, I guess. I just wanted to mention that before we got too much farther into the meeting.
Oh, I hope
Another
so.
possibility is Michael could review the video and help with minutes as well. Now.
That's what I do.
Well, that was one question I had when we get to the bylaws of, I think I missed the meeting when Michael said he would take over doing the minutes rather than having the secretary do our minutes. That's a question for another time to be resolved. Okay, so I'm gonna,
What is the
I'm
question?
sorry, are you done with the
who writes the
Arbor Day?
minutes?
Oh,
Well, Michael offered to do that as an adjunct secretary to the board, and we said fine. And so he was the one preparing the minutes the last couple times, or since he's been on board. Technically, I suppose the secretary is supposed to prepare
That's what it
those,
said in
but
those
we,
bylaws you sent us.
I'm sorry?
That's what it said in those bylaws that you sent us? That the secretary writes the minutes?
Yes, right. And that's correct.
that's what most secretaries do.
Send the application on Arbor Day, okay.
Mary Nell, I'd feel more comfortable if the application came from the tree board and he could contribute his part.
Okay, then I'll just ask about the part on the budgeting part on how much was for planting versus pruning versus removal. And see if that can get teased out. Okay. Gotcha.
Any other communications? No? Moving on to committee reports, public relations. I would report that Jen and I yesterday appeared on for a taping of a television show hosted by Donna Kavanaugh at the PBS station in South Bend. The show is called What Gives, and who sees it, I'm not sure. When they're going to see it, I'm not sure. But we talked for about an hour about the tree board and what we're doing, the grant that we have, the importance of trees, and every other issue that she could think of asking us about. And it went very well. It was a lot of fun, actually, to do, and I appreciated Jen doing that with me.
Likewise.
So we're going to be famous somewhere in the PBS world through Donna Kavanaugh.
That's Channel 34 WNIT out of South Bend. Is that?
Yes, right.
So I don't know if their viewership overlaps very much with Michigan City, but perhaps it will be something that once they share it with us, we can post, to our Facebook and.
Yeah, we're supposed to get a download of the show, so we'll have that. We can put that on Facebook if you like.
It'll be a bean for Michael to count in his grant report.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we're just out there spreading the word, telling the story about Michigan City and all the great things that are going on here. Any other public relations issues? I see we've had some things on Facebook. That's good.
I put some tree care stuff up there every once in a while.
Education and outreach. Any education and outreach issues?
I don't have anything new to report at this time. I wanted to talk about this ancient accepted tree list.
We'll get to that, I think, when we talk about the ordinances.
I'm told that it has to go under new business.
Okay. The other thing I would mention on education and outreach is that I had the opportunity to read Betsy's PowerPoint, I think it was, that was used at the library presentation, and I thought it was just excellent. It's such a
Thank you.
great summary of information about tree care, about everything having to do with trees, and including a lot of information about our grant program and stuff. I think a really good way to approach it in terms of to the public.
I'd be happy to bring that anywhere in town that wants to see it.
In fact, if you wanted to circulate it to the rest of the board, that would be great. I think everybody would benefit from that.
And I have one suggestion for education and outreach. The Northwest Indiana Green Drinks program. I
Oh.
believe they meet virtually now. And I'm sure that they
Nancy
would,
Moldenauer.
yes, I believe they would entertain a proposal from us. And then we could give that, you or whoever could give that presentation, you do such a great job. And then it would be recorded on YouTube so that people who did not attend in person could watch that as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Well, I'll contact Nancy since she's my council person and ask if they're interested in all or part of that.
That's not a Save the Dunes thing, that's something different.
They work with Save the Dunes on it, hosting it, but I believe it's an independent thing, work with Cindy and Green Trees.
Okay.
There's also different chapters in different cities too, so South Bend has one, Knuckles City has one. So. And also for education outreach, what about neighborhood association meetings? Would you be?
I'd be thrilled to go to any of those.
Actually, Michael spoke at our neighborhood association. And I
That's
was going to
right.
thank him, but he's not here.
How did it go?
It went great.
That's great.
I think he went over very well, so.
That was Elston Grove?
Yeah.
It was,
That's great.
And how was the attendance?
Well, it was,
Was it better than the library? That's all you have to say.
I forget how many people were at the library. It was
Well,
probably not as good as the
There was
library.
an Eastport Neighborhood Association member that was at the library presentation, and they had been asking me tons of questions that need to be forwarded towards you, so.
Okay, are they interested in getting the whole show or
No, not so much as, I don't think the whole show, I think they had specific
just
questions.
certain?
So,
Well, if the questions are focused on the grant, I think Michael should handle that.
well, a lot of what they were asking was more Michael questions, so I forwarded them
Sure.
to make sure that they contacted Michael, because it was more of, something about a issue with the tree on their individual property, and I kept
Right.
asking them, is it, is it a street tree? Is it on your property? Is it on your neighbor's property? And then kind of navigating those pathways. So,
So perhaps we can get some more mileage out of your presentation.
That'd be great.
It's a good thing to have in
Well,
your pocket.
yeah, and it's pretty general. It can be
It can be
changed.
tailored,
It
yeah.
can be tailored for this or that.
Okay, very good. Good idea. Moving on to the Forester report. The Forester is not here today to answer questions about his Forester report. Does anyone want to raise any? That's been circulated to everyone. You should have it. Does anybody have any comments they want to make about the Forester's report?
I just had a question in regards to the budget. It seemed like it was more just office supplies, nothing that like detailed operations, maintenance, those types of things.
Well, you're talking about the tree board budget or the Forester budget?
The Forester budget.
The Forester
That was
budget is,
that was a part of the Forester report.
the
It was
Forester.
a number of attachments.
The Forester's budget is much more extensive than ours.
I think the budget, he sent them both at the same time, so his forestry report was alongside our small office supply budget.
Got it.
Right, right. But his Forester budget was, I think, provided 2 months ago, maybe, in an email. If you don't have it, we can get it to you. But it was much more extensive. It's a couple $100,000 at least.
And if you remember, Michael was instituting a schedule of fines and fees for various things and got, I guess, the go-ahead from the city council to, for those fines and fees to go into his budget. So that's kind of a pretty clever thing to get him more funds. But we don't have anything like that.
No,
But I am
Not yet.
very confused. See if I can find the paper that's confusing.
about what?
Two papers. Oh, yeah, it's, this, one is 2-34. This is this a good time to talk about that?
Well, I was just going to move to that subject under old business. Are there any other questions or issues about Michael's report? First of all, the forestry monthly report. Not hearing any.
Probably.
Let's move on to old business. And one of the matters of old business are the ordinances that he had suggested he had proposed modifications to some ordinances, 3 ordinances. And the main one is the, where is it?
102-34?
Correct.
102-34, which is the ordinance that establishes the city tree board duties and responsibilities. And Jen circulated, put together I guess an edited copy of that showing the the original ordinance and the changes that had been proposed by Michael to that, and although I think that document that you circulated, Jen, did not note that the one paragraph in that the 4th paragraph that starts with "it shall be the responsibility of the city forester," etc., is really an entirely new paragraph. Which kind of changes that ordinance. But in any case, I took that ordinance and we had some discussion about this at the last meeting, which was the idea that if we're going to propose modifications to this enabling ordinance, which is a rather important ordinance from the standpoint of the tree board and what our mission is and what we do, that we should look at it in a more global sense. Are there other issues that need to be addressed in this ordinance? Do we need to propose other modifications to the ordinance? And so I put together a draft with my ideas, also showing them on a edited format so that you can hopefully see what's new and what's old on the ordinance. I have paper copies of that. I also circulated the electronic copy of it. If anybody would like a paper copy, I can make that out.
Is it the same as the electronic?
Now, I'm going to try to draw you into this,
Yes.
Mr. Former President. My thinking on this ordinance business was, particularly with regard to this ordinance, is that if we could discuss it among ourselves and determine what we want to do in terms of proposal, and then I could take this to city legal to get their feedback. I could take it to the mayor, get her feedback, talk to Vidya, Cora, our council representative, and see if there is interest in proposing an amendment to the ordinance that would take it, somebody would take it to the council. But before we get to that point, I think it's kind of important to have us all here on the board on the same page, at least to be able to approve our own draft proposal on the ordinance. And the changes that I put in here were to clarify, in my mind, what we're supposed to be doing. And it seems that our mission here is to consider tree-related issues for the city, whatever they are, wherever they arise, whether it's in the form of an ordinance or a regulation or a policy or a budget or a grant proposal, anything that's tree-related. It seems to me the proper role of the board is to have authority to consider that and investigate that and make recommendations about it, to whatever the appropriate person or agency is within city government. And we don't have any authority to actually force anybody to do anything, but we are sort of, I guess the way I see us, is a sounding board to give tree expertise-based recommendations and opinions to other people in the city government so they can make informed decisions about policy and implementation. And so that's the thrust of my changes, proposed changes to the ordinance, at least in Section 1, duties and responsibilities. In Section 2, that is the urban forestry management plan, which we had discussed before, and which comes from Michael's recommendation that it be the forester that actually writes that urban forestry management plan, and not the board, but the forester should put that together. He has the expertise to do that. He has the time. He's the appropriate person to draft it. But I added in there, in that paragraph, that it should be reviewed by the tree board and subject to our approval. And that's our job. And then it would be submitted the first of the year to the council for approval, and then thereafter every 4 years after that. Finally, I did add the third paragraph in my draft about funding. And that was, in part, Betsy raised the issue about, well, we need to think about this funding issue because we don't really have a mechanism for funding, and why not? I mean, we should delineate that we can use grants, we can use donations, we can use, and we also should have access to other funds from the city that are raised, in my opinion, from tree-related policies, permits, application fees for tree trimmers, that sort of thing, arborists. That would legitimately be, I mean, logically be where our funding should come from, and that every year we should submit a proposed budget to the mayor and the council, and operate in that fashion. So it sort of formalizes that process and enables us to obtain funds and use them. And so it kind of lays that out.
For the part you were saying about from fees and tree trimmer funds and so on, I don't see that part in here. Am I just not?
It says the paragraph 3 says the tree board shall be funded by donations and funds from tree-related grants, permits, and applications in the city. That is what is contemplated by permits and applications. People who apply for a permit in the city, if it's tree-related, that's money that we could conceivably be part of our budget. Not that we're going to ask for all of that money, all those funds to be used on the tree board, but that's where our funding would come from for whatever we have. If we submitted a budget for $500 or $5,000, the money would be theoretically coming out of those funds.
I could see the tree board being written into a grant if it required an education outreach component. So if the tree board is already doing those types of activities, especially from May through October, like, you know, if you're at the farmer's market every week and you need outreach and promotional materials, well, where does that funding come from, right? So like Betsy had raised a question in regards to if I have an invoice or receipt for ink that I purchase out of pocket, well, who reimburses Betsy and what does that mechanism look like?
This does not mention anything about funding from the general fund, the city's general fund. And we have been funded by the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
That's where our $50 a month comes from. That is where our $500 for printing comes from. All of that is out of the general fund. It is not out of donations, although sometimes we do use our donations for that.
That's a good point. I did not mean to limit us to these
But
other.
it doesn't say anything about the general fund.
We-
I think it
Would
would
be
be,
good to include general
because
fund.
it looks like it is not included. I mean, it
That's
isn't.
that's a good point, Laura. I think we should probably change that to make it broader. And wherever the money comes from, we don't care. I guess, you're right. It really doesn't matter where the money comes from if we're getting it from the general fund or somewhere else. But I will work on that.
Okay.
And I think Michael also, in my meetings that I've had with Michael on the grant, because I think he proposed that I be kind of a grant liaison, I've been on some of those meetings. It is important to note, and I don't know how formalized that is, but with this large grant, my understanding is that Michael really wants our support primarily on education and outreach. And so, things like, I had presented some signs at the last meeting. There have been talks of developing like a flyer, door hanger or flyer that could be given to residents to say, hey, do you want a tree, or we'll be planting in your neighborhood. There will be some overlap with that of, I believe there's like a $20,000 budget for educational materials through that grant. Now, there's a little bit of that overlap in that we will be assisting, but those purchases will go through Michael's city budget through the grant.
I think maybe the way to change this, and just thinking about it now, is that we will submit a budget and possible funding sources can include
Additional funding sources.
Yeah, they can include the general fund, they can include other types of fees, they can include anything, really, just to allow us the flexibility that way.
Okay.
That's a good point.
I know that Michael had asked for the fines that come from people who chop down trees that they're not supposed to, that would fund him.
Yes.
And I don't know about the permits and applications. I think that probably goes into the general fund at present.
It probably, I don't know where it goes, whether it goes to Michael's budget directly or whether it goes to the general fund, but I think you raised some good points, Laura. It was not my intention with this amendment to, necessarily specify that we need to get our money from a particular source, because that entails all sorts of other approvals and agreements that have to be made for that to happen. I think we just want to leave it more open and just say we can submit a budget, and we will submit a budget, and wherever the city gets the money from, that's up to them. That's a good point, very good point, actually.
I wouldn't be surprised if our opportunity to submit a budget has come and gone.
For this year. Yeah, well, that's
I believe
okay.
it has, and I don't know that this needs to go in here, but I think to state that the council liaison will help, or however we go about facilitating that communication between us and the mayor and the city council, just to kind of formalize that, because it seems that this last year we had some difficulty with that.
I would say most years we do.
Okay.
I agree.
Just so that we're clear on deadlines and who do we submit this to, and how does that process work?
So I think we need to
Okay,
be way ahead on that instead of behind as we usually are.
are there any other thoughts about the draft of ordinance 102-34?
Yeah, and I sent you something, and that was kind of saying the first sentence needs to be, about coming out of the city budget, and then the other stuff, so I concur.
Okay, well, I will, if there's no other comments about this, I will.
Oh, there are. I just think by the first regularly scheduled meeting in 2025, I'm not sure if that's realistic.
Well, that
I
came
noticed-
up at the last meeting, and
Yeah,
Or I also put in, or as soon thereafter as practical.
I like that.
That's better.
And that should also be continued for every 4 years thereafter. And I noticed in one of the earlier things, it was by February 15th. And I was thinking,
It's not in this one.
within the first 3 regularly scheduled meetings, which is pretty close to February 15th, I think. February 14th would be the precise thing.
And I think this will be an especially important year as we are eagerly awaiting the results of a certain inventory that I think
Right.
will inform said plan.
Which we will hear about here shortly.
Yes.
Good point. Okay, anything else on this draft proposal?
well, in general, Jim, I think it's very good, and, with the little tweaks that have been mentioned so far, it can be even better.
I will make the changes and bring it back to the next meeting, and then maybe we can put it up for a vote by the board. and then move on to the next step of circulating it to the people that need to see it. That sounds good?
Sounds good.
Okay. That's that ordinance. There are also a couple other ordinances that Michael had proposed, and I wanted to ask him today about the status of those ordinances, because we didn't really discuss them before, and I don't know where they are in terms of
Yeah,
the process.
I don't either.
But
That was pretty.
They're pretty important, and personally, I think that our involvement in ordinances, in formulating ordinances, is probably one of the most important things we do here, because we are making law or proposing changes to the law which will long outlast this board. And so we need to be careful about what we do and really give it some due consideration. But the other ordinances that perhaps we can discuss next time were his proposal on 10241, which has to do with city tree care, in which there's an entirely new portion developed regarding tree permits and requiring permits for any person to cut, trim, or prune, or remove a tree on
Right.
private property without a permit, and a $50 application fee, and submitting a site plan and a photo of a tree and all that. I have serious problems with that.
Well, I would like to
too.
see what it looks like after it goes through the city lawyer's offices.
Yeah, I think we need to ask Michael to, share with us what the current version is of that, so we can have a discussion about it. The same thing is true of the other ordinance, which is 10236, which also deals with tree care, and which is an entirely new ordinance, by the way. That is, I believe it is.
36 tree species to be planted.
Tree species to be planted. Permit required, a $10 permit to plant anything on a right-of-way, I believe, or an easement. Submitting a site plan and everything. I think that's also just something we need to discuss.
No, I think 36 exists, because I printed out what's on the current website.
You do think it exists?
Tree species to be planted.
I printed it out and it didn't show up, but maybe I was in the wrong spot. Well, I guess we need to see a comparison then, maybe a side-by-side comparison, so that we can.
Well, my first impression, we haven't discussed these ordinances thoroughly, but my first impression is that a $50 application fee is uncalled for, especially if we're talking about private property.
Right. I agree. I think if people will be up in arms about it.
And that pruning a tree on your private property, although, many people do it incorrectly, should still be the call of the property owner.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that and discuss this in greater detail when the forester is here.
Let me just throw something in for you guys to think about. Fees for dog and cat licenses aren't really collected at the city either. How's that enforced? So, it's the same thing with a $50 tree. I'm gonna plant a tree, what are you gonna do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know, what are the plans for how he will handle that? We don't know.
I think the smaller the fee, the more likely people would actually follow by that.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about enforcing fees for people who cut down city-owned trees,
Yeah.
especially on the parkways or in parks or.
That's a whole nother issue, though, yeah.
Right, and that's probably a different part of the ordinance, and,
Yeah, that's a big difference, yeah. All right, well, so we'll come back and discuss this the next time we have our forester and ask some more questions about it, and put that on the agenda for next time to consider all these proposed ordinances.
And FYI, I will certainly note, the reference to weeds, I think, could include what I would call native plants.
Where are we on
Well,
36?
oh, you know what, I'm in a different ordinance,
Oh, 02?
102-1,
Oh, yeah, okay,
never mind.
Okay,
yes.
all right. Any other old business?
Well, I guess it's kind of old, I'll bring it up. So there's the ordinance, the invoice for tree seedlings, and the payment is due today from the state nursery for our pawpaw, 9-bark, black oak, white pine, and river birch. And I just was gonna check with Michael on, you know, if that's been paid and his plans to pick it up, the timing of that. So I will just,
If we are required to
excuse me.
approve that for payment, I think we
That's a
should
good
just
idea. Oh, that's
approve it.
excellent.
I move that we approve payment for those trees.
$193,
$193.
yeah.
These are the trees for the giveaway in the spring?
That's, okay, that's 500 saplings, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Hearing the motion, anybody second?
If I can continue on with this. So the amount due is, by credit card is $197.19, and by check is $193. So whatever the appropriate amount is, I just don't want to limit us.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you've already put it on your credit card?
No.
No, that's what it says on the invoice.
Oh, I see.
It's alternatives.
I think because I contacted them last year, they sent this to me when I forwarded it on to Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, I second the motion to pay the DNR Nursery, Valonia State Nursery, for the 500 saplings in the amount of between $190 and $200.
All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Fine.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Very good. Any other old business?
Well, one thing we had talked about was keeping our volunteer list on Google Docs, so I just want to keep that, I'll bring that up every once in a while.
Good, that's a good idea, because that is important. We did make a big pitch, by the way, on volunteers on our TV showing,
Good.
or our taping yesterday for volunteers. We want to be involved with the community. Please give us a call. Notice, contact our forester or whatever. So other old business, would that include our tree inventory, our ongoing tree inventory? And perhaps a report from Mr. Graff about that?
Yes, sounds appropriate.
All right, thank you. We did talk a little bit about the tree inventory update before the meeting started, but I'll repeat it now because I don't think everybody was here yet, and just for the sake of your video documentation,
Yes.
us into the meeting minutes. To end October, we were approximately 70% complete with the street trees. So we'll be wrapping up the street trees before the end of this month, probably before Thanksgiving. We're right on schedule, maybe even a little ahead of schedule over where we thought we'd be, thanks to the beautiful weather we've had so far this
Yeah.
fall. Once we complete the street trees, which again, I estimate that to be somewhere around Thanksgiving, we'll be moving on to the parks and the cemeteries and the golf courses and the city-owned properties. So goal is to have it done before Christmas, and I don't see any reason that we won't be.
Great.
I do have, yeah, I do have, I printed out a progress map for everybody too, if you want to pass
Oh,
those.
excellent.
There's enough for everybody, you can take one too, Tim.
And Phil, you mentioned before the meeting also started that you were interviewed by a reporter for the newspaper out of
Yeah.
LaPorte.
That's one of my bullet points here. So, yeah, next, to add to your public relations, I guess, your television program, which is wonderful. I also got interviewed by Donovan Barrier from the LaPorte County Herald Dispatch about 2 weeks ago. He came out and caught up with me in the field. He contacted me as you told me he would, and gave me a pretty lengthy interview, took some pictures of some of our other field techs working on the tree inventory. Got some quotes from some of my other techs as well. So he said he was going to write the story this week, and hopefully it would appear in paper next week. So
Great.
I got everybody's email here, so if I get the link, which he said he'd send me, I'll make sure that I send that to So I think that's gonna be a great piece as well.
I'm sorry, which paper did you say it was?
That was the LaPorte County Herald Dispatch.
Thanks.
All right, I've got an apprenticeship program update too. Was that in Michael's Forrester's report or no?
He mentioned it, yeah.
Did you want me to
Not-
give you?
not-
Yes,
but
please.
many
But not a lot about it,
details.
yeah.
Tell us what you know.
The apprentice is scheduled to start Tuesday the 12th, which is next week. Granted, it was approved at Monday night's City Board of Works meeting, and I hadn't heard if it was because I don't think Michael was working yesterday, so I wasn't able to follow up with him. I don't know if, I think, was the city off yesterday because of election day? That's what I assumed.
Sure.
So I checked in with him yesterday to see if it had officially gotten approved. I don't see why it wouldn't be. And then she also had to just pass the usual onboarding process of the city of just background check and drug screening and all that. So, but granted all that falls into place, she'll be starting on Tuesday because I think Monday is also an off day with Veterans Day. So we're really excited about that.
Excuse me.
Got just a quick point or two of clarification based on the conversation about Dogwood Hills and the RFP for tree planting. So you are correct. There is going to have to be an RFP that goes out for the spring tree planting. If it's paid for by the grant, they're required to get 3 bids. I had talked to Michael about helping out with that because it's technically not within the scope of our contract, but I'm happy to help. We're gonna have, I'm gonna have all the data on local planting spaces, and you guys already have a tree planting list, so essentially that's just gonna be an exercise of matching the right trees with the right spots, and I've got a template for that. I've got a list of all the contractors that we can send to locally. I just went through this exact same thing in the city of LaPorte, so it's all fresh. Dogwood Hills did win their bid, by the way, and are going to be planting there next week, so I'm familiar with that operation. They do a pretty good job. And then lastly, President Melovich, you mentioned the Urban Forestry Management Plan a little while ago, and I wanted to bring this up too, because I'm not sure if you're aware. You mentioned that that was going to be Michael's job to write that. We're actually under contract to do that as part of this grant. So part of what they paid for is for us to either redo or revise an existing one, or to compose one from scratch, which is what I intended to do, because I think the one that you have is old, is from like
Very old.
2000, I think.
Ancient.
So 24 years old. So I'm prepared to fully have that written from scratch when we have all the new data collected here at the end of the year. So it is called in the in my contract with the city, it's referred to as the Urban Forestry Mitigation Plan, but from the way it was described in the RFP, it's essentially an Urban Forestry Management Plan. And when we get to that point, I want to talk to you about changing that title too, because I don't really like that. Called it the Urban Forestry Mitigation Plan, it makes it sound like we're trying to mitigate.
Yeah, it sounds like something's wrong.
Word mitigation is defined as to lessen the pain, and we don't want our trees plan like we're trying to lessen all the pain that the trees are inflicting on us. We like to think of it more as let's maximize the benefits of what we have and then mitigate risk as part of it. But essentially, it is an urban forestry management plan, and we'll be under contract to write it. So,
Okay.
and I think
And that's-
Michael's aware of that as well.
And that's part of the US Forest Service?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's for the tree inventory, the urban forestry, again, mitigation plan, and then we're also doing a canopy cover inventory and analysis with LiDAR. So
What's
that'll be
LiDAR?
all. It's essentially a data set that's created from a LiDAR flyover, and a lot of this, we don't fly over, but there's an open source data base for LiDAR data. It's a way that they map your canopy, your tree canopy.
Okay.
And there's
So
lots of
this would
interesting things that goes along with that too, like collecting their species, like estimated species composition by using color of leaves that are refracted back during the flyover, which will have actual boots on the ground, step-by-step data to compare that to. But we'll be able to look at different sectors of the city, because one of the pieces of data that we're collecting is land use. So residential versus commercial versus park versus, whatever else. And we can look at what the canopy cover is in each one of those. I don't want to use, the term market sectors, but each one of those land use sectors. And we can analyze from that which will all fall into the urban forestry management plan at the end. But, where do we need the trees the most? What areas are heavy, what areas are light?
And I'm curious, just given the nature of the grant, that my understanding is that we are able to inventory trees throughout the entire city, but then the planting through this grant at least, it's not to say there won't be other sources of planting, but through this grant, the trees must be planted in quote-unquote disadvantaged
The
areas.
CGS
So will that will be incorporated
Yes.
into the plan?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Phil,
And that's most of the.
Sorry, for tree
Yes,
planting?
yes. Yes.
So what I would probably do is, this is the way I anticipate doing it, because most of the city does fall into that CGS area,
Mhm.
except that center,
Right.
there's one
I've
area
heard,
right in the
and then
center,
there-
looks like a big donut. So the donut would be what's covered,
Mhm.
and then the inner circle, whichever area that is, we'll still do the tree planting for the entire city. But the RFP that'll go out to the contractors, which will be for by the grant, will be in the CGS areas, and then any trees that we want to put in the non-CGS areas would be, have to be self-funded, or
Okay.
otherwise funded, not through the US Forest Service grant.
Gotcha.
So the CGS stands for like the climate and economic
Climate
justice, I
justice.
can't remember the full acronym,
Yeah.
but yes, so you're correct, the grant did pay for the inventory throughout, because you can't really make a plan unless you know everything you have.
Yeah.
But any tree removal, any tree pruning, and tree planting has to be in those disadvantaged CGS areas.
Phil, based on what you're finding with the inventory, and the grant is going to be funding the planting of 500 trees for each of 3 years, a total of 1,500 trees. That's a lot of trees.
There's a lot of trees.
It's a lot of trees, and it's hard to even actually think about it. We planted 25 or 20 trees one Saturday last year. I mean, my gosh.
And we
Is the
didn't
city going to be
dig
able to absorb all that? Do we have the space for all of those trees based on what you're seeing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a disparity between open planting spaces. I think I mentioned this at last meeting, between the open planting spaces and the active trees. More than we would typically see throughout the Midwest, but very similar to what we would see in Northwest Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of open planting spaces. You'll definitely have enough.
Okay.
I think, not that I'm concerned, but I think the larger concern that we need to really stay on top of is the post-planting care of those trees. And I know we're talking about engaging with the SCA,
Sure.
but the watering and the mulching and the monitoring of those. And whenever I send out an RFP, I also ask for a watering contract. Not that we're gonna do that, but I think it's good for the
Yes.
US Forest Service to see, because they're investing all this money in us, they wanna make sure we're doing it right. So it's good to always have a watering contract, or a watering plan at least, and then you got a contract.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would be great to get the SCA involved in that. Or if not, then we need to get somebody from the city, maybe someone in Mike's department, and get a tank and a truck.
I know that Michael has been making progress on trying to procure a watering truck.
Perfect.
So that's fantastic, and he has a training program for municipal staff that cares for trees. I won't speak for SCA, but like I said, I was in a meeting with Michael and SCA and Forest Service, where they were kind of negotiating, the details of what Student Conservation Association can commit to in terms of having a crew here to plant and maintain trees. The way that their existing model works, they're operating over in Lake County already, so they have a model already. And the way that their model typically works is that crew is planting during the planting season and then also watering during the watering season. So that's the way it typically works. I think Michael and SCA are still kind of negotiating exactly how that's going to look. If it's, SCA, I believe, does have some funds of their own and is seeking additional funds, but they've kind of committed to, here's how many trees we think we can handle. And so I think it's just in that negotiation process of, how that will be handled.
I would be willing to bet that even at 70% done with just the street trees, I would be willing to bet we already have over 1,500 open planting spaces.
Yeah.
And that doesn't count the other 30% of the street trees or anywhere else that we're gonna do.
When next year do we begin planting of the trees?
Ideally, it would be in the spring, so April, May, June April, May would be actually ideal. June would be getting a little late.
Will that continue during the summer, or will there be a break during the summer?
It would be good to not plant during the summer. But spring and fall, what I typically like to see, if Mike wants to get me involved in this part of it, it'd be great. But again, that's not part of our contract now, is the tree planting planning. However, if he's got money budgeted for me to help you with that, I would absolutely love to. I would like to do it as 6 planting cycles. Do a spring, fall over the 3 years, and do about like 250 each planting cycle to get to your 1,500.
That sounds
It makes it
great.
more manageable. It makes it, less taxing on the watering crews, because you're really watering so you can get them established, and then you're gonna be working on the next, set of 250 trees each time. It is just easier for everything, for post-planning care, for the monitoring of that,
That's great.
and it makes it easier for you guys to budget for.
It's a lot of trees.
And then there's also certain trees that you can't plant in the fall that you can plant in spring, and vice versa, so it's gonna help us achieve those goals of species diversity, and try to stay in line with best management practices for keeping, within the 2010-5 rule, just having a more diverse tree population. You
Right.
can utilize both spring and fall.
Did you say you had a tree list?
I think you guys do, right? Yeah.
Well, there is an existing one I got from the city clerk, and it's way out of date.
That was my comment and question, and this is, I believe, being considered under new business. But I am curious because I do think it relates to your work with your inventory. So I'm just curious, we do have a planting species list apparently. Already, reviewing it, I can see some changes we might want to make, some updates.
And that is the list that's Exhibit A, that you just passed around. It's titled Accepted Tree List, parentheses, large trees, closed parens, Exhibit A. And is this an attachment to the existing ordinance? Or,
Well, when we get to that, I'll tell you how I got there.
And we're maybe not there yet, but I suppose my question to you, Phil, is will your inventory of plantable spaces, will you be recommending species for that, or just like a type,
Not
size?
on a planting space by planting space basis, but the urban forestry management plan has a whole section in there on recommended species.
Okay.
So that you can consider this to be updated. This does appear to be pretty old considering it's got blue ash on it. So it's gotta be at least 20 years.
Well, I'm just wondering, before we try to tinker with this, if you already have a
Yes,
list.
it'll be part of the urban forestry.
Okay, so we can consider this ancient history.
Yeah, and you can table this if anyone from this group was gonna update this, because it's
No,
part of a work
That's
contract.
good news.
good
It's
news.
less
One
work
last thing for
us.
Betsy to do.
The list that maybe you were thinking that I had was from the DNR, like their list of here are the available native trees for Indiana. And I had, copied that off of their website. So that might have been the list, unless you were thinking of the one from the city.
No.
Okay. Those are the 3 lists.
This is the one from the city,
Right,
Yeah.
which we just determined is
old.
dead and buried.
Any initial takeaways? We have a whole lot of silver maple, yeah?
There's not silver maple. We don't really get into
Not there yet.
analyzing the
Yeah.
species composition and the conditions as much.
Wait
We're
for
just kind of letting it go mode. The biggest takeaway I have again is just the disparity we're just running a lot of open planting spaces.
Yeah.
So, that was what we termed stocking density, the stocking density. So here again, it's not uncommon at all for Northwest Indiana. We see it a lot. So everywhere where we've done inventories here,
So this planting,
stocking density.
this grant and this planting is going to transform this much of the city. It really is going to make a huge difference. It's going to be great.
It's gonna be fun to watch.
Any other old business?
I just have one more question for Phil. Have you had any dealings with the public as far as positive or negative? And what will we do if, like the last time I planted with Tim, somebody comes running out of the house and says, no, don't plant a tree here.
That was our sewer line issue, I think, right?
Yeah.
Well, to answer your first
Suppose it's
question,
warm.
we do, because, one of the things that goes along with the weather being beautiful is more public interaction. And that does one thing, it slows us down. Of course, myself and I train our techs to be polite and, answer questions, what we're doing. But let them know that we have a certain amount of trees we gotta get to in a day before we get engaged in a long conversation. It's a mix of positive and negative. You get a little bit of everything. Some people are like, yeah, this is great, I love that we're doing this, and other people are like, who's paying for this? Why are my tax dollars going in? Counting trees, so you hear a little bit of everything. When it comes to tree planting, this is something that should be addressed. And as you guys have pointed out at this meeting, maybe one of the, something to be perfect for the tree board to address is your second part of that question is, what if someone doesn't want a tree? How do you approach that? And that's different everywhere you go. I've worked in communities where the city forester was very stringent and said, this is my parkway, and I'm gonna plant here whether you like it or not. And then there's other people that are a little bit more flexible and willing to work with people if they don't want a tree. That's beyond anything I can recommend, but as you guys have stated earlier, as President Melwood stated earlier, in his definition of what your function is those are issues for you guys to resolve.
And I think
And then bring to the city legal and figure out what the protocol for that is.
And I believe in the grant, there is, funding for education and outreach. There are certain requirements of, hosting public meetings, doing certain amounts of outreach. So I think that's going to be a larger conversation, not for you, you make the recommendations, but a larger conversation, I think, for us to have and work with Michael. Because we certainly want to make sure that we're engaging.
It is a worst case
community,
scenario
and-
though we want to address and think about, So-
Sure,
I have my feelings.
and how
but
much
we can have that
notice we
discussion.
give people before we put the tree in the ground.
I think we just send you out there to talk to them. Any other old business? Hearing none, we will move on to new business. I have one matter of new business, and do you have something that you want to talk about the list, or is that moot
No,
point?
it's
Okay.
And take care.
made obsolete.
The bylaws, well, moving on to my new business, the bylaws require us to, require the president, rather, to appoint a committee to consider nominations for board officers to be voted on in January. So I'm going to appoint a committee of myself. Betsy has agreed to serve on it, and ask Laura if you would serve on this committee to consider nominations of people who might want to be officers of the board for the next term, which would start in January.
Well, I have a question about that. It seemed to me reading through the bylaws written in 2000,
Mhm.
that many of these things were superseded probably by council action, city council action. Like when the mayor appoints someone to the board, they're provided with, I think, 3-year terms or whatever the term is. So it's not a yearly cycle anymore.
Well, the mayor's appointments are to be on the board. I'm talking about the officers on the board, which is a different issue. And that's what's addressed in the bylaws. You're right, the ordinance is what addresses the terms of the appointments by the mayor. And that is totally her prerogative.
I'm wondering, since so many things in the bylaws seem to are no longer current, if we need to respect this one requirement.
I think we should. I don't see any downside to doing it. I think
Okay.
it's just something that has to be done. The terms are for a year of the officers that have to be renewed, or a new person has to be put in those positions. And, I think anybody can nominate anybody to be, as I recall from the last time we went through this process, and everyone else stepped backwards, and one person was still standing in place to become the leader of this august group.
That happened to me too.
Anyway, I just thought perhaps the three of us could have a bit discussion and talk with everybody else and see who wants to do what next year. So it will be voted on in January. Okay?
Yes.
Is that agreeable?
Sure.
You guys, okay.
And for the January meeting, were we able to, notify people that we changed the date of it?
I have.
Because we're not having it on
We
January 1st.
moved the date, right? It's gonna be like the 8th, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Has anybody notified anybody at City Hall? No,
I have not, but
I
I
have not.
have not. Do we have to do that, or
We
is
should
it?
ask, we could ask Michael to do that, I think. I mean, he handled that,
Yeah,
last, when we changed the meeting time.
yeah,
He updated that on the website.
yeah.
So, yeah, I can email Michael
Okay.
and ask him. And so the new date is January 8th.
Because we don't want to have our New Year's celebration.
And the
In
other
this meeting.
question is if Drew White has been notified,
Rooms available.
because he's in charge of where we meet.
And I will announce, this is, I suppose this was under perhaps old business, but Drew Hart with US Forest Service did inquire about coming to a meeting and giving us kind of some
He's
updates.
welcome anytime.
Yeah, I think he opted not to come today because he got word that Michael was not able to be here. So I think, perhaps at the next meeting, we could invite him, see if he's available.
Please.
Yeah, and I think SCA at some point is very open to coming as well.
Oh,
so
we're
wonderful.
anxious to meet them.
Yeah,
I don't know who invites them. I mean,
yeah, I think between Michael and I, kind of working on the grant stuff, we can coordinate.
okay, so you'll take care of that?
Yeah, I'll work with Michael I know he's already had some conversations with Drew, with Forest Service about coming to a meeting at some point.
Yeah, well, speaking for myself, I feel like I need more information about how the grant is going. And not hearing a lot.
Okay. We'll make sure to have a report at the next meeting. I know that Michael has been working on his first reporting to US Forest Service.
Yeah.
And I went to his office and had to sit down so we could just kind of go through things and what's required.
Thank you.
Provided him kind of some templates of ones we've done in the past for similar grants. So I know that that's in the works, but I will make a note to get with Michael and so that we can get more of a report out next time.
So when is your next meeting with Drew?
I don't know that it's on the books yet. The next meeting will be a meeting with, I believe, both Drew with Forest Service and the Student Conservation Association to plan with them. They had launched some dates in November that we couldn't get ahead of, so it looks like it will be into December for Laura,
Will you give that to?
because people on vacation.
Whoever it is.
Okay, sure. You haven't had a meeting in the last month, have you?
Not in the last month, no. I did meet with Michael to just kind of look at the contract and the reporting requirements, but that was not a meeting with US Forest Service or SCA.
Not an official meeting.
Correct.
Okay, so you're gonna talk to Michael about notifying everybody with regard to the January date, and then
Yes.
getting a report at the next meeting about the status of the grant and such.
Which includes Drew White for the meeting, a taping of it.
Yes, right, very important. Anything else? Good board comments by the board members? Hearing none, how about the public?
This public has been chiming in every once in a while already, so I think I've had my fair share of comments.
We don't want to hear
So,
from you.
thank you, board, for your service.
The next meeting, the next meeting will be December 4th, 2024 at 5:30 PM Central Time in the same location here at the IBEW building. We invite the public to come and bring your comments and enjoy these festivities and partake in our discussion about trees in Michigan City. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I so
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.